was. Lord help us. Hi there, friends. I'm Scott Wakefield, lead pastor at First Christian Church of Greene County, and I'm here today with
Myra Ettenborough.
And we're going to have a coffee convo. Coffee Convos is an opportunity to tell the story of God's work in the lives of our friends. And so our friend Myra is going to talk about that, and we're excited to hear about all that good stuff.
Thanks.
And
It's good to be
so
here.
thank you for coming.
Thanks.
So Myra, tell us who you are, how you got here, some bio, give us some general introduction to who you are and all that good stuff.
Raised in Hawaii, and many years was at a place where I broke up, had a long relationship that broke up. My family moved back to California,
Okay.
and I was there alone, and it was time for me to move back. So lived with my brother and his family in San Jose,
Okay.
met my husband,
How many years were you there?
18 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Met your husband there.
Met my husband in California, Northern California.
Uh-huh.
Got married a couple years later, had our first two daughters, and then started to move away from California. It was just not a place where we wanted to have to both work
Yeah.
and raise our family. So
Cool.
moved to Chicago
Yes.
and lived there for years.
Yes.
And
How many years were you in Chicago?
7.
7. Okay. And
Deerfield.
northern suburbia, basically.
Deerfield.
Yeah.
And
Deerfield.
Northbrook.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Yep.
Yes.
Great place.
We do share that in common.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
We really do. And had our son there.
Okay.
And then moved a couple different places and ended up in Roswell, Georgia.
And
Lived there for 20 years.
20.
And then
For some reason, I had that backward. I thought you were in Chicago a longer time and in Georgia a shorter time. Okay.
no, they're both really huge in our lives.
Yeah.
Chicago, even for 7 years, we still have our friends there.
Huh.
We still go back and visit the church.
Huh.
It's just gigantic. A lot of the people who are in our Sunday school who went to Trinity, Evangelical Trinity, are now pastors at different places. So
Gotcha.
kept in touch with them.
Cool.
I'm now divorced 2 years ago, and just miracles galore of moving here to Greenville. It's a whole story in itself,
Okay.
and what's happened since I lived in Roswell until here. It's just, there's so many things. But the biggest thing, miracles. There's
Yeah.
just miracles.
Tell us some about God's leading you to today and that, and give us a couple snippets of those.
Let's see. My daughter and her husband graduated from Tusculum. So we've been coming up here for a while. They've been here for 19 years.
Yes.
And back and forth. We came to Greenville, brought her back and forth to school.
Yeah.
Have 2 granddaughters here.
Yes.
But never thought I'd want to live in Greenville. I love Roswell, Georgia. That's where my friends are. People love us. It's
Yeah.
just a wonderful place. And
You were well rooted there in that sense.
well rooted,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Very well rooted.
Yeah.
And because we had moved around a couple different times, we planted.
Right.
And
I understand that.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So to come here, my daughter and her husband kept asking me to come here. People in the family were saying, when are you going to move closer to kids?
Yeah.
You need to.
Yeah.
And every time I would say, I love it here, but I would pray and ask God if I'm supposed to move someplace or be someplace different.
Right.
Change my heart.
Right.
And
Right.
and one night he did. The next morning I woke up, I want to move to Greenville. It was, it was a burst of the heart. It was God's
Really?
desire to move to Greenville.
Yeah.
I sat on it for a couple of days. I didn't believe it. Because I wanted to know, is this really
Sure.
true? Is this,
Yeah.
can you confirm this? And I didn't.
Did I have a bad dinner that night? And was that what it was, or is this really?
Right.
Yeah.
But really, it was so fast. It was all during the mess here of the prices getting high in homes, and it was crazy. And I said, let's just put it off. I wasn't in a rush to do it.
Yeah.
And a perfect house came, and there's more miracles there. And it's about a half a mile from my daughter and her family,
Yeah.
which is amazing. It takes me 7 minutes to get everywhere. Literally.
That's a different world.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's really great.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
So that is how I'm here, and I absolutely love Greenville with
Yeah.
all my heart. Everything about it. There's not anything I don't like about Greenville.
Yeah. Cool. So before we continue to hear some more about that kind of stuff, traditional curly or waffle fries?
I'm non-discriminate, really.
Meaning you're happy with whatever fry, or
I
you
like
don't
fries.
like fries?
No, I love fries.
Okay.
Any kind is just fine.
So you're like a fry lover. Any kind of it's okay.
Yeah, I can have one of somebody's, or I can have my own. Even
Even sharing is okay. so-
sharing is good with fries.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
There's something I don't, but
I mean, I understand the heart of that, but I'm not sure, because when I get a good fry, like my fries, I'm a big fan of both traditional and waffle, but depending on where it's from, and I like them a little bit crispy for sure. Yeah, I'm a little bit of a fry dork. So
where's the best?
I think it depends. Sometimes I go through Chick-fil-A waffle fries, and I ask them to be a little bit crispy. So I ask them to do them well done.
Which means you get fresh.
Which means I get fresh, and I like to add a little bit more salt. But if I go to Pal's, which I sometimes like, I ask for less salt because it's too much. But I also like Hardee's and Burger King and KFC and Wendy's are similar in the crispiness, and
You do like them all.
so that's true. I am strangely discriminate though. I'm particular and picky, and yet super boring on the other hand. I don't know. So, okay, cool. So, tell us about how you came to faith in Christ. Tell us about some of that.
I was raised in the Presbyterian Church, the last of 4 kids.
Okay.
And by the time they came to me, it was, they'd been through it all, I guess, is how to say it nicely. And when I got into 8th grade, Sunday school, it was just about what boy likes what girl likes what boy. And I didn't
Right.
like it.
Right.
And so I asked not to go anymore.
Huh.
And being the last, I started going with them to the sermons.
Gotcha.
And slowly, and I don't remember exactly when, we just stopped going. We didn't talk about Jesus, and yet they were good people, my parents. And,
Yeah.
But it just wasn't, we didn't talk about them. Even
So it was just sort of in the sociocultural air, kind of.
it's what they did growing up.
Yeah.
You always went to church. My grandmother was Methodist. She was a devout Methodist, United Methodist. Yeah, but before we were married, we decided that we would look into who was God in our lives. I'm sorry, we decided before we were married that when we started having kids,
Right.
we would start to. When I was pregnant with our first, years later, we moved into our first house, and we moved into a neighborhood that was filled with young Christian people having babies. And of course we did.
Yeah.
I mean, they were wonderful. They prayed for us. They prayed over us. They prayed with us.
Yeah.
There were women who we were losing weight after our babies. We'd walk every night, and they would talk. This one woman, Judy, would just talk to Jesus like he was her best friend. I'd never heard anybody
Yeah.
talk like that. I would talk about Brazelton. They would talk about Dobson. I mean, it was just back and forth. And
Yeah.
they started,
So it was integrated
Yes.
into everything else. It was personal, normal. Right. Okay. Cool.
we went to
Yeah.
Bible studies with our next door neighbor, a women's Bible study, started going to their church, and it was when Brian Morgan was preaching Romans that I
Yeah.
literally heard, I knew Jesus had been around me. I knew what he wanted me to do, but it was a real conviction that I needed Jesus at that moment during a sermon. And
Cool.
it grew from there. I don't remember everything happening at once, but it
Right.
grew
Yeah.
in great ways through my whole life.
Yeah. Would you say that there's a sense in which when some of that, I mean, there are other ways to describe this, but when some of that switch was flipped in that sermon that you described, that it was like you began to hear God through Scripture and the Spirit speaking to you in ways that, like, were your heart language, or
Very alive.
and it was different than before in that sense.
Very, very different. It was alive. It was, I heard people say things different. I heard the people in our neighborhood say things. There was a couple who were going out into the
yeah.
mission field.
Yeah.
I heard her describe it differently. I was interested in the Bible study, the women's Bible study,
Yeah.
differently.
Yeah, we've talked about this a bit. You loved getting deep and
I do.
digging into that stuff.
I
yeah.
do.
Yeah, fine with me. I'm struck by how much I'll hear things that I used to hear and they're the same kinds of words oftentimes, but sometimes when I hear them now, and you made me think of this as you were talking about hearing what people were saying differently. I hear the same kinds of things, but I'm seeing it entirely differently with many more layers and depth and a larger trajectory than I understood before. Is that kind of what you mean?
Like waking up.
Same kind. Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
It's like snoozing and waking up and just a little bit at a time, waking up a little bit more.
Right.
And then I start noticing people snoozing.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it
differentiates that a little bit.
Yeah, it does.
And you see those things clear on both sides.
That's where I sound wonky, because I start talking about that, and
Right.
people go, that's the biggest thing about stopping obstacle to waking up is that you think you're awake, but you're snoozing, and they kind of go, oh.
Yeah, right.
So
You can be deceived and asleep at the same time.
yes, and perfectly normal with your whole community.
And everything looks like you're awake and fine. Right. Yeah.
But I think I mentioned to this once before. So if a person listens to your sermon and they go, wow, I mean, that's awesome, that's incredible, and they walk out and they go, whoop. That's what I don't mean to sound judgmental, but it is just snoozing. It's just not doing anything.
Right.
Or you're doing normal. You don't know any
And you don't know any different. Yeah, I'm always amazed at how different people hear the word preached or taught, or they're reading it, whatever, all of that. I'm always fascinated by how different people hear and see that differently and receive that so differently. The same people will say, dude, there are so many cool things that you helped point out that I've never seen. But they're not talking about me, right? They're not talking about, I just happen to be the messenger of the stuff that's already actually in there. And so they're really actually saying, I've never seen some of that stuff, or that was really helpful in this way that applied differently than whatever. And so some people are hearing it and receiving it as the good shepherd talking to the sheep and being fed, the flock being fed. And then some people in the same exact sermon will go, I don't understand a word you said, and you use all those big words sometimes. I'm thinking, you should have seen what I sounded like 15 years ago when I used big words.
Yeah.
It's very simple now. The same sermon, different people will respond totally differently, which I understand people are different. And some people like people who tell lots of stories, which is fine. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's from the scriptures. And then there's some people who like to go into a bit more verse-by-verse explanation, as I kind of do. And so people are gifted differently to teach differently, and people hear things differently, respond differently to different ways that people communicate. But I'm increasingly, and I'll stop talking just a second here, but I'm increasingly, like you just intimated, amazed at how true it is that when Paul says things like the gospel actually divides. It offends some, and it confirms others. And it's whether or not they're being led by the good shepherd sometimes, not always. I'm not saying if somebody goes away from my sermon, they didn't hear it, that they're condemned. But I just mean, I do think that the gospel does that. And you begin to see that more clearly with time as you experience it. Yeah. We've talked about that a couple times. Yeah. It's cool.
C.S. Lewis says it perfectly, and I'll send you the quote, but it's how the Bible does offend people. And that's what it's meant to do, and it draws you in when you have the faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense then when I'm talking to non-believers, it's so incredible what you said.
Right.
There's nothing. I get it. I'm not offended by it.
Yeah.
It's not me. It's the Bible.
That's right. It's God's word who does all that.
But it doesn't go out void, which is incredibly encouraging.
Yes, it is. Because that means that we can trust that it's doing its work in whatever way it does it.
Yeah.
And we don't have to be threatened by it
or
what somebody else does to respond or not. That's been a hard lesson for me in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I totally believe that. I agree with you. I trust that, yes, but it's still hard for us sometimes to live out and to have to deal with, at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. So we've talked about who you are and what brought you to Greenville some. What's the biggest difference between not just Roswell, Georgia, but places you've been and Greenville, Greene County? What are some of the differences you've experienced, if any?
It's just the best right here and now. And I do kind of live in the moment. This is it.
Yes, you are a present for the moment person, which is something I'd like to be more.
I can teach you.
What?
I can teach you.
I'm learning right now.
Yeah.
Cool. One thing I like about Greenville, and I think this was there in other places, I just didn't realize it. For a community, and I think I see this more here because we've been here longer than anywhere else, and we're more rooted than we have ever been. And part of why we're more rooted is because we've decided we are, and you alluded to this earlier, we're planting here. We're sticking around here. One thing I like is that there is a rootedness to the community that is long-term, that is relational, and people know each other. And the reason they know each other is because they know each other's cousin, aunt, uncle, grandma, mom, dad, etc. And not just the relationships, but there are institutions that go on throughout generations. And that's something that I don't think I saw as much because I was younger when I was living up north. But looking back, there are tons of folks who have lived there their whole lives. I just didn't see it, as well as the institutional part of it. But I think also down here, there is a little bit more history of it's looked and felt some of these ways for the last 200 plus years, right? And it was a little bit less that way in some parts of Chicago and the big city that I didn't see as much. So I like that about rootedness and communal life. So back to you. What is a difficult challenge in life you've had to overcome? And how did God grow you through it and all that? Yeah.
Probably the biggest thing that's happened in my life is that I was wrongly accused and found guilty of a federal crime that I didn't commit.
Okay.
And having to go through that and tell the truth, no matter what the consequences were.
Dude, that's...
And standing on
when
God.
The consequences could have been a bit different if you hadn't.
Yeah, well, they threatened me with 20 years of prison versus the plea agreements, and there are multiple.
Yeah.
The plea agreements were 1 year home confinement. Wow. So it was big, and I couldn't decide on myself. I had to go to God. I had to fast. I had to journal. And I heard him say, tell the truth, stand on me as your rock.
That's right.
And it is, till today, I still go to that.
Yeah.
Tell the truth, stand on me as your rock. And also, I had to have him make that decision. I couldn't, 20 years in prison, that was like, wow. I couldn't take that on myself. And he graciously gave me his word. And so I did. I was taken to trial. I was found guilty through manipulation and lies and sentenced to 7 years in federal prison camp and $17 million restitution. So the consequences were big. It was giant.
Yes.
When I talk about Roswell, Georgia,
yes,
it was a community that surrounded me and loved me and prayed for me the whole time. And they were Jesus' face in front of me during constantly. But then when I did have to self-surrender, I did have to go to prison.
Yeah.
It was me and Jesus. And you just don't get, I did serve 5.5 years. You just don't get 5.5 years with Jesus like I did. And so all the times I asked for him to get me out of the situation,
right.
When I was finally sentenced, I did have to admit my selfishness and that I was doing it his way, and that was the best. And asked for things before I went in to come out still liking and loving people.
Right.
And I did, and more so, and I'm still reaping the benefits. I'm still processing a lot of it, but I mean, I saw Jesus in ways no one has ever seen. Well, of course I have. I like to say no one has ever because I experienced things.
You're the one who right? So others have experienced similar things, the same kinds of things, parallel, sure, but no one's ever experienced.
Right. And I didn't read about it. I know when I read the Bible, I know it's true, but I experienced, and I am an experienced person.
Right,
That's how things are cemented.
Primarily how you filter that stuff?
Right.
So the fascinating part of it, well, there are lots of fascinating parts of it, but okay. This could be as relatively minor as a year, home confinement, whatever. And 20, 17 million, etc. Those are kind of the boundaries of that decision. And there's probably not a whole lot in between, but it's an extreme difference. Am I going to 100% at all times tell the truth about the matter, regardless of the consequences? What, as you're going through that, what were some examples of practical moments where a person did or said something, or God spoke to you through his word in this way, or what were some milestones and grounding things for you throughout that kept you, I have to tell the truth?
Well, probably the biggest one, just to know I needed to go before God, was that I always told my kids, tell the truth, no matter what the consequences are.
Right.
You have to. And here I was faced with, so that was big. I can't be a hypocrite, and I have to live that out. That was the biggest thing. So that's huge.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that from my parents, 1 billion times as a kid. And now I'm trying to say those things to my own kids. And again, every day I've got moments where I think, am I going to tell 100% the truth?
Right.
Because we don't have to be faced with the federal prison for however many years and however many $1 million versus this kinds of questions for that to be as much about the integrity of who God is and who we are living out his truth and his character. Yeah. We just perceive, holy cow, what would I do in that situation? I'd probably go for this real easily. I can see myself, right? And there's a pressure to it that's heightened, no doubt. But we are all in those moments every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It even goes now to the point of still processing all of it.
Sure.
That when I am checking my own integrity, I haven't been doing it for the past 2 weeks, but every thought that comes up, take every thought captive.
Right.
Was that a truth? Was that a lie? Was that a truth? Was that a lie? So, and then I started doing it. Then all of a sudden I'm going, you know what, Holy Spirit, why don't you do this for a while? Because I'm starting to hear things that are rote. They're cyclical.
Right.
I hear them all the time and I believe them. I don't even hear them anymore. So I'm not doing truth and lie. So you do this for a while.
Right.
And I'm surprised at what comes up as, ooh, wow, lie. Ooh, big one, lie. So where did that come from? Long ago, processing, I don't know, but it's good. Truth or lie, truth or lie, truth or lie.
Yeah.
Because I want to speak the truth.
Sure.
But I don't know when I'm not sometimes.
So it's another layer of the redemption process of our thinking, our emotions, our experiences.
Perfect.
Along the way. It's just another deeper sanctification of the Lord's work in us process.
Yeah, deeper. It just goes deeper into the heart.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just ask Jesus, just sit in my heart for a minute. Just sit together. I'm not asking for anything. Let's just sit. And I guess it's my posture is some of it, but
sure,
he'll dive deep.
Yeah.
And it's now refreshing. It's not painful anymore. And just recently, it's just like, just handle it, just handle it, just handle it, just handle it. So for me, it's awesome because I'm used to saying, okay, next week, or okay, I'll put that on my list. Okay. Now it's just like constant. It's just a refreshing encouragement to get that off right at the moment that Jesus wants to handle it.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy, actually.
It's a rediscovery moment by moment of who God has always been and what the Spirit's always been doing in the world and what Jesus did on the cross, and all of that stuff in an ongoing way applied to us. As you were talking, I was thinking I'll get to moments where a little later on down the road I think, I haven't even really been like working hard on this thing intentionally, because that's one of my things. I'm a type A intentional freak in lots of ways, recovering one, and so I'll get later on and realize, oh, this thing that I used to work on really hard is getting better as I just maintain every day the realization of the way that God has always been working, and that I'm just continuing to discover it more deeply. It's not exactly what you were talking about, but I think that the parallel is this: when I find that my desires have begun to be something where I'm not just feeling like it's difficult heart surgery, but I'm feeling like, oh, thank you, Lord. That's a little encouragement that I'm desiring the good of who you are, a little differently than I was before. That's what I was thinking of as you were talking about, like when you're sitting with that moment of Jesus is just sitting with me, as you said. I was thinking of Sabbath rest and how like if I just sit there, God's still God, and He's still in control, and so I'm giving myself over to that in ways that He is continuing to work on in me, without me having to prove anything or do anything, because it's already done in Him. So the desire change for me to want and desire the good is how I think about reprocessing those things, as you were talking about.
And what's my desire and what's His desire?
Yeah.
Because He gives me the desires of my heart, but I don't want the desires of my heart anymore.
Right.
Because I want His best.
And yours becomes His.
Yeah.
Right.
But only if I'm receptive. I mean,
Yeah.
because there's a big difference there. I don't want that big difference, but there is.
Yeah. I've also been thinking along those lines about, I think I used to think that, and I've seen this in a number of places in the Scripture and thought, like with Romans 7 and places like that, where the Spirit continues to become my desires. And there's a big theological controversy about this issue, but I think in the brokenness of this world, until it's all finally consummated at the second coming of Christ and everything is completed, my desire is still going to have to be continually
Yes.
undone and recommitted to the Spirit's work.
Every day.
Yeah, every day and at every moment. And it's not going to be perfect. And so there's a strange freedom in me realizing that the glorification does come, even if I don't get to it today.
Yeah.
Or by the time I die,
Yeah.
And so there's a strange freedom and rest in that for me, that even in those areas where I feel like I would have felt threatened by it, now I'm like, okay, that's true. I just need to give over to it, and that's fine. I'll trust it.
Doesn't that freedom feel almost like a gift sometimes? It's like, that's the freedom in Christ. This is it right here. I want to do this again, and I can't do it. It's Him. I mean,
Right.
But it is a gift. It is
Yeah.
it is a joyful gift.
I'm astounded at how many times the word gift shows up with, especially grace, but even faith. But grace as a Pauline description of everything. Gift, grace. Gift, grace. It's often close, and I hadn't seen that until, 10 years ago or so, and I started to begin to see it everywhere and go, oh, this is way more God's work than I thought it was.
Kind of like, could it be glory to glory?
Yes, from one degree of glory to another, 2 Corinthians 3, and from grace to greater grace in Romans 1.
Grace upon grace.
Yes, grace upon grace upon grace. Cool. Okay, so for all the non-abstract people out there listening, because you and I can keep going like this forever. So how has that experience of being wrongfully accused, going to prison, what'd you say, for 5.5 years?
I served 5.5, 85% of 7 years.
Oh, okay.
It's federal prison.
Okay. You're walking with God and all that. He's teaching you to continue to become who He's created you to be and where He's called you to be. How do you think that made you stronger and more equipped for what God's got for you than before?
Because I had to be weak for him to be strong. And that was really easy, to go weak, because I had nothing. All I had was him.
Right.
Again.
Right. All that stuff stripped away when you're
everything.
in that environment.
You have nothing.
Yeah.
Or your support system. And even though friends continue to support me, they're
Right.
not there.
Right.
You can't just go to the store. You can't just go visit a friend. You can't just call. Or if you do call, you can only call for 15 minutes. Or you can email, but it's costly. So there's all these stops, and then they hear everything you say. So,
wow, yes.
It's just a weird thing. There's no internet. You can email, but it's all controlled.
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking, you know what, if I get hungry, or even if I'm like emotionally hungry,
Right.
I can go off to the store and get
Right.
something. I can just go get it. Nope, that's gone.
Right.
Right, like normal everyday things that we can do in good and bad ways that we control.
Right. And that's where God gave me experiences
Yeah.
where I learned the biggest things that I still rely on was in those moments that I could not get out of, that he took over.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, at the very basic level, I had nothing, and he took over, and I saw him, and I was like, oh, it was just like that, you never left me.
Right.
You're still there, and here you are in such a tangible way.
Mm-hmm.
You just taught me something I will use forever. You just showed me something that you say in the Bible. I mean, every one of his promises are true. I
Yes.
can tell you personally,
Yes.
every one of them are true.
Right.
And that he does speak to us different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of lost my train of thought there.
Well, I have a couple follow-up questions anyway.
Yeah, go.
Having been through that, and as you were talking, I was thinking, it's akin to when I hear some people on the mission field or when they're in a country where you experience religious persecution or those kinds of things. You are having to depend on the Lord alone to get through the day and to move forward, and nothing's going to work if he doesn't work. Having been through that, and I've had this kind of experience some with folks who have been through this before, they come to where we are now. They come to this world and they see believers, they see the material luxury and control that we all enjoy in this world,
Yeah.
in this country especially. What are some things that are some differences between that and the world we're living in here in the United States? And what do you see about believers? What do you see about the differences that we can learn from and that have been clearer to you coming out? Does that make
That
sense?
I can just now say yes. Whatever Jesus says, I say yes.
Huh.
It's just yes. I don't go through the filter.
Of the filter of what?
Should I, could I, would I, want to? Do I have time for? Am I equipped?
Right.
It's not there. In prison, I said yes. And I didn't want to do things I did. And yet he used me in incredible ways.
Right.
I mean, the favor that I had in prison was astonishing.
How so?
Friends sent in, I got approval to teach sermon series.
Huh.
4 different sermon series, each one like a 6-week, 4-week, 5-week, 4-week,
Yeah.
all different topics. And DVDs were sent in to me. We weren't allowed to have DVDs. You'd be shipped if you're caught with DVDs. And
But you were allowed
the
to.
chaplain wrote me a letter to keep in my locker with the DVDs that I was able to teach
Cool.
in the chapel. And for every person who went through the classes,
Yeah.
every single one, friends from outside sent in a book for every single person to go. So there's no cost to anybody.
That's cool.
I always sent those books.
That's cool.
And managed them. That's miraculous.
Yeah.
There's like a 97% attendance from people went through the first one to go through the second, through the third, and through the fourth. And the only reason why it was 97% is because some people went home. Because people, they were just drawn into it. It was captivating.
Hungry for it.
They were hungry for it, and it was real, and it was a video that they could actually see, and then workbooks that we could work through. And when
And
I
it's
started,
like you said with you don't get 5.5 years with Jesus often. People don't get, and that's a moment for them. That's the same exact kind of experience. What else do I have? I have to depend on something beyond me, obviously. And so the openness to hear God's speaking to them through that curriculum, like you give yourself
amazing.
to it if you're hearing it. Yeah.
And then I taught them over and over and over. So I heard.
Right.
I mean, I got to where I would start watching people. There's one where the pastor is talking to the people, to the men,
Yeah.
just the men. He says, women, just sit back for a minute. So these women got to hear a pastor talk to their men.
Yes.
They're daughters of the king. They're not a commodity.
Right.
They heard that for the first time. These people, there are so many who never had modeled any of that. So
Right.
to experience that and then to put that into my life and was powerful. And then over 550 Jesus Calling books were sent in. That was my favorite devotional going in.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I would read it to other people. People started asking for it. I started asking friends to send it in. I could only receive 5 at a time. I could only have 5 at a time in my locker. And yet, when I got 5 in, 5 people came up to me. God managed the whole thing. When I ran out of books, nobody would ask. And then all of a sudden, somebody would say, do you have another Jesus Calling? I got a new bunkie in. And boom, 5 would arrive.
Yeah.
550, that's a lot of books to give out on not my... I mean, I did like that book. I did want to give that book out. That was a little bit different, but yet it was so controlled, and God just did all that just because I said yes.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've always sort of defaulted to is, I don't know how many people are going to get this book that we're going through. Let's order 50 per campus, 150 per campus, whatever. So I would kind of like, hey, the just in case over.
Yeah.
I'm going a little bit more toward, and some of this is just, we have to be leaner and better stewards of our resources. Hey, if we've got 5 at a campus and we run out, we can order more. And so that is a way of saying perhaps God is going to bless that. And if we're left over with 100 books from 150 that we ordered, maybe that's its own lesson in both those ways. It's cool because it helps us think about how obviously God was blessing that. And if you got to the end of 5 at a time and nobody else started coming, or you're speaking with them and talking with them, didn't warrant more of that, then we don't have more coming.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody across campus would say, they'd yell, hey, Myra, today, Jesus Calling them. And 20 people around would hear it. And they'd come up and go, can I have a Jesus Calling?
Cool.
Yeah, it was all God. I didn't manage it. He did.
Yeah, yeah.
And to turn that over to him and to see him manage it
Yeah.
was huge. And he did that in my whole life.
I've been trying to think and feel the tension of that as a type A freakish 20 pages of written vision planner that I've always been in the past. I'm trying much more to just kind of let that go, because you can have control and growth, but not both. And so managing some of that and letting the control go so that others can grow and so that they can learn how to do this for themselves.
And God can do that.
That's how it's meant to work, in fact. It's crazy.
Fancy that.
Yeah, what do you know? What do you know?
Yeah.
Super cool. Super cool. So, last couple questions we always have are, what's God teaching you lately? What are you learning lately? And then what are you excited or encouraged about?
What I'm learning lately is to sit with him more. And that doesn't mean quietly. Sometimes it just means driving in the car. It just means focusing. It means, you said it this Sunday, put him above all things.
Right.
Be a good witness. Those are just things, focused. Those are just things that are starting to come easier. Because I know that if I start taking things for granted and stop focusing, I become complacent. And that's a really way too comfortable place for me to be.
Yes.
I don't like it, but I slip into it, and it's like 2 weeks just go, whoa,
Right. Sure.
You know? So that acknowledgement to stay there
Okay.
and how to do that, I don't quite know, and I need his help in doing that.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
It,
I've been feeling similar some about the staying present in a place of missional focus for myself, which in a way I'm sort of cut from that cloth. I've always been in kind of a type A intentional freak in that way. But I'm learning how much, way more than that I used to think, was missional focused from my understanding of my wants and desires and needs in ways that ended up sort of sanctifying the way I would say, hey, we need to make sure we're focused on this thing, right? Which people can come along with. I mean, you could build things with that, no question. But I'm trying to keep myself in the tension that requires not just the focus, because I know that's good and right, on what Christ's goals are. And so I'm trying to say, like, okay, so in this relationship with Myra, or this coffee convo, or others around me, or even when I'm thinking about something or writing something, what is God's goal for the people who will receive this, for him, for her, for the people who are listening to Coffee Convos? How can I make sure that the good parts that God made of my intentionality are redeemed for actually his purposes and not so much mine? And so for me, when I was saying some of that Sunday, my thought for me is just do what you know God has for you to do in that, and keep asking those questions about what he wants for others in that, and the results, he will manage that.
and be the receiver and not the striver.
Yeah.
You know, because sometimes our
That's a good
receiver's
way to say
broken.
that. Yes. Yes.
So
Yes, we are strivers, aren't we? Generally.
yeah, we are.
Yeah.
And then another thing that's really encouraging me, again, is being here, being in Greenville, starting the women's life group.
Yes.
It's something that I know the Lord spoke to me a year ago about wanting to, just the differences in my life and being here in a brand new place.
Yeah. Right. Right.
It all lent into.
Yeah.
And now it's all coming together. And
Yeah.
it's exciting. It's neat. It's fun. I'm excited to see what's going to happen.
Yeah. There have been a number of women who have responded and said, I'm in. And that's going to continue to grow. And you just had your first meeting last night.
We did. Meet and greet.
The meet and greet, had some fun, and just kind of got to know each other. And
Made decisions. We collectively said what night, what time, what
Cool.
we wanted to do.
Cool.
Following the basic outline, but how do we want to incorporate that into our group?
Right. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what we intend for that is, it is a structure to follow, and adapt that as you need. Yeah. In fact, we're going to be rewriting some of that so it's a little more easily adapted than it currently is.
One person wanted to know, she's new, she wanted to know, so tell me about what you actually studied. I really want an in-depth Bible study. And I went, oh, you need to get the app. Because there's the sermon guide. You can do one question or you can go through the whole thing, and there's
Yes.
things to read every single day.
Right.
So it fit.
Yes.
And it
Good.
was nice to have that just moved right into
Oh, absolutely.
what
Yes.
people want.
And that's exactly what we're intending. It's been a bit of fits and starts at first because not everybody goes through that and sees, oh, there are links to some more information or whatever, and I can study that on my own. But we're trying to beef that up and simplify it so that everybody who's doing the life group, even though it's sermon based, can learn to do that process for themselves, and that we're providing them plenty of fodder from Sunday's sermon, from the sermon guide itself, which has daily Bible readings that fit with it, and that you can take your own notes, you can have your own thoughts as you're going along, and then the inductive process itself will mean, in the end, you're applying things that together we are all experiencing in our own ways. I mean, it's not applied exactly the same way, but it's a process that, as we've talked about, the Good Shepherd leads his sheep, right? And if he's speaking truth to you, then that's happening with each of us in own ways through His Word, through His Spirit, applying it to us. That's really cool because it helps build actual, hopefully, Christ has had unity over time.
Yeah.
And it adapts differently to different groups.
Mm-hmm.
So
Different
I'm
bodies.
super excited. I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to, if you didn't. The Women's Life Group is forming.
Across all the locations.
Yes, that is one. We've made an exception, just so you know.
I feel honored.
Yes. Myra, you get to be the exception.
Yeah.
To the campus-specific thing, which is generally how they work. But it's obviously important and needed for us to do that for this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's cool because one of the things I've always felt like we haven't been able to do well enough is, hey, church is very much a families with kids kind of environment, which is not bad, duh. But it's like, hey, what about these people who aren't in that slice of life anymore? Or maybe older and the kids are out, or younger and single, older and single, whatever the case might be, or single moms especially. There are tons of single moms, actually, or functionally single moms. And so I'm excited about some of that group being a way for us to meet those needs in ways that we haven't been able to as well in the past. So Myra is your person. Those of y'all who need some good time together in Bible study and fellowship. Did you all eat anything last night? Was there any food involved?
Well, we went to 421 Coffee in Mercantile. We didn't go to my house, but I did bring little baby muffins,
Okay.
pumpkin cake muffins, and we all had something to drink.
So a little bit of that is
We did.
generally a good thing.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Uh-huh.
Good stuff. Thanks for coffee convoing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
It's been great.
Cheers. It's been an honor.
Yeah, it's fun.